The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Karoline Leavitt sat at her small kitchen table in Washington, D.C., sipping coffee while scrolling through messages on her laptop. Outside, rain tapped against the window. She almost missed it. The subject, line buried between news alerts and network memos. Vatican press office urgent invitation. Her breath caught. Karoline worked as a news anchor for a major American network. She reported on politics and world events, but she never covered religion. Full-time, why would the Vatican contact her? With trembling fingers, she opened the email. Ms. Leavitt, His Holiness, Pope Leo XIV requests the honor of your presence for a private interview at the Apostolic Palace. She read it 3 times. Pope Leo XIII, elected just 2 years ago, was known as the People's Pope. He spoke about climate change, poverty, and forgiveness in plain language that resonated worldwide. He rarely gave one-on-one interviews, especially not to journalists outside Europe. Yet here it was, an official invitation stamped with the Vatican seal. Her interview would be broadcast globally. Karoline leaned back, heart pounding. She touched the silver cross necklace resting against her collarbone. It belonged to her grandmother, Margaret, who'd fled Poland during World War II. Margaret carried nothing but this cross and her faith when she arrived in America. Karoline wore it every day, a quiet reminder of where she came from. She called her producer, Daniel Brooks. Daniel was a practical man with a tired voice, always juggling a dozen crises. "The Vatican, you?" he blurted after a stunned pause. "Are they confusing you with someone else?" "They mentioned my report on refugees last month," Karoline said. The piece had highlighted Syrian Christians rebuilding their lives in Kentucky. She'd ended it by saying, "Faith isn't just words. It's what we hold on to when the world falls apart." Maybe the Pope had seen it. Daniel's tone shifted from shock to urgency. "This is huge, Karoline. Huge. But remember, no controversy. Talk about unity, hope, his charity work, avoid politics, well, anything that could blow up online." "I know," she murmured. "And Karoline," Daniel added gently, "maybe don't wear that cross on air. It's beautiful, but it's noticeable. We don't want anyone thinking you're preaching." Karoline's fingers tightened around the cross. "It stays, Daniel." "Just think about it," he said before hanging up. Preparations began immediately. Karoline spent days researching Pope Leo's life, his childhood in Argentina, his work in slums before becoming a priest, his unexpected rise to the papacy. She drafted questions about hope in divided times, questions that felt personal. Karoline's own faith had been tested 3 years earlier when her brother Peter died in a car accident. She'd almost stopped praying then. But wearing her grandmother's cross had become her way of saying, "I'm still here." I still believe her friend Lisa Carter helped her choose an outfit for the interview, a simple navy dress. "Wear the cross," Lisa insisted. "It's you." The night before flying to Rome, Karoline visited her local church. She lit a candle beneath, a statue of Mary, the scent of wax and old wood filling the quiet space. "Help me do this right," she prayed. "Not for fame, for Peter, for Grandma, for everyone who feels alone." Rome buzzed with summer heat. At the Vatican, Swiss guards stood motionless in striped uniforms. Karoline followed a young priest through marble halls lined with priceless art, her heels clicking on centuries-old floors. She tried not to stare at the frescoed ceilings, but awe prickled her skin. Father Paul Russo, the Pope's secretary, greeted her in a sunlit office. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a voice like dry paper. "His Holiness wishes to meet you briefly before the interview," he explained. "A walk in the gardens. To put you at ease." "Of course," Karoline said, smoothing her dress. The gardens were a hidden paradise, roses, fountains, and lemon trees shading stone paths. Pope Leo XIV waited near a fig tree, dressed in simple white robes. He looked younger in person, with kind eyes and rough hands that had clearly known hard work. "Welcome, Ms. Leavitt," he said, shaking her hand. His English carried a soft Spanish accent. "Thank you for coming so far. It's an honor, Your Holiness." They walked slowly. He asked about her flight, her family, her work. Karoline answered, trying to ignore the cameras discreetly filming nearby. She felt calm until his gaze settled on her necklace. "That cross," he said. "It's unusual." "My grandmother's," Karoline replied. "She survived a war because strangers helped her. She said this cross reminded her God was in their kindness." Pope Leo's smile faded. He stopped walking. The air grew still. "Take it off, Ms. Leavitt," he said quietly. Karoline froze. "I'm sorry?" "Remove the cross. Please." His voice remained gentle but firm. "It does not belong here." She touched the silver chain, cold against her skin. Father Russo watched, tense. A bird sang somewhere, the sound suddenly too loud. Daniel was right, Karoline thought wildly. This was a mistake. But her grandmother's face flashed in her mind, a woman who'd kept faith through bombs and loss. Karoline's hand fell from the cross. She stood straighter. "No, Your Holiness," she said, the words barely above a whisper. "I can't." Pope Leo studied her. For a long moment, no one moved. Somewhere beyond the garden walls, the world waited for their interview, unaware that everything had just changed. The gentle sounds of the Vatican garden, the rustle of leaves, the distant splash of a fountain, the chirping of birds, seemed to vanish. All Karoline Leavitt could hear was the frantic drumming of her own heart. The Pope's quiet request, "Remove the cross," echoed in the sudden silence, followed by her own trembling refusal. She felt the blood drain from her face. Had she really just said no to the Pope? In the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. The kind, approachable man from moments before was gone, replaced by a figure of quiet authority. His gaze remained fixed on the small silver cross resting against her navy dress. Karoline instinctively touched it again, the cool metal a familiar anchor in the storm of panic rising inside her. She glanced towards Father Paul Russo, the Pope's secretary. His thin face was tight, his eyes wide with disbelief and a flicker of alarm. He shifted his weight, looking from the Pope to Karoline and back again, clearly unsure what to do. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Karoline's mind raced. This can't be happening. The interview. Daniel warned me. She thought of her producer, Daniel Brooks, back in Washington. His voice echoed in her head. No controversy. Avoid anything that could blow up online. While refusing the Pope's direct request certainly qualified as controversy, her career, the biggest opportunity she'd ever had, felt like it was crumbling before it even began. And why? Why would the Pope ask such a thing? The cross wasn't large or showy. It was simple, personal. Her grandmother's faith, her own faith, felt suddenly under attack in the heart of the Catholic world. "Ms. Leavitt," Pope Leo finally spoke, his voice still calm but lacking its earlier warmth. It was the voice of command. "I must insist. The cross, remove it." He gestured towards the necklace with a small, precise movement of his hand. Karoline swallowed hard, her throat dry. She felt dizzy. The beautiful garden felt like a cage. "Your Holiness," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand. This cross, it belonged to my grandmother. It means everything to me. It's not just jewelry, it's her faith, my faith." She forced herself to meet his eyes, searching for some understanding, some hint of the man who spoke so passionately about compassion. His gaze remained steady, unwavering. "Its significance to you is noted," he said, his tone formal. "However, within these walls, its display is inappropriate for this occasion. Please, take it off." There was no anger, but an absolute certainty that chilled her. Father Russo took a small step forward. "Ms. Leavitt," he interjected, his voice strained. Perhaps it would be best." He trailed off under the Pope's glance. The world seemed to narrow to the small piece of silver at her throat and the Pope's expectant silence. Karoline felt a surge of defiance, hot and sudden, cutting through the fear. Her grandmother, Margaret, had carried this cross through war and displacement. She had clung to it when everything else was lost. Karoline remembered the stories, the hunger, the fear, the kindness of strangers that her grandmother always attributed to God working through them. To remove it felt like a betrayal, not just of her grandmother, but of the quiet strength that small symbol represented in her own life, especially after Peter's death. Taking it off would feel like admitting her faith was conditional, something she could hide for convenience. "I'm sorry, Your Holiness," Karoline said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. She kept her hand resting lightly on the cross. "I truly am, but I cannot remove it. My faith it's part of who I am. Taking it off feels wrong." Pope Leo XIV's expression didn't change. He studied her for another long, agonizing moment. Karoline felt like she was being weighed and measured. The air crackled with tension. Father Russo looked like he might faint. "Very well," the Pope said, the words dropping like stones. He turned slightly, his white robes whispering against the gravel path. He addressed Father Russo. "Father Paul, inform the production team. The interview is postponed indefinitely." Karoline gasped. "Postponed? Indefinitely?" The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. Father Russo paled. "Your Holiness, the broadcast, the arrangements, the world is waiting. They will continue to wait." The Pope replied, his voice flat. He looked back at Karoline. "The interview will not proceed while Ms. Leavitt wears that symbol. The choice remains hers." He gave her one last, inscrutable look, then turned and began walking slowly back towards the palace, leaving Karoline and Father Russo rooted to the spot. The dismissal was absolute. Karoline watched his retreating figure, a wave of cold disbelief washing over her. It was over. Just like that. Because of a small silver cross. Father Russo recovered first, his professional mask slipping back into place, though his eyes were troubled. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, his voice clipped, "please come with me. We need to manage the situation." He gestured towards a different path, away from the direction the Pope had taken. Numbly, Karoline followed. They walked in silence through a less ornate part of the garden, towards a small side building. Inside it was cool and dim. Father Russo led her to a simple, quiet room, an office perhaps, but spare and functional. He closed the door. "You must reconsider," he said bluntly, turning to face her. The earlier alarm was replaced by a weary urgency. "This interview is of immense importance. His Holiness rarely grants such access. Millions expect to hear his message today. To cancel now. The scandal, the speculation." He ran a hand over his face. "Please, Ms. Leavitt, it is a small thing. Remove the necklace, for the greater good." Karoline sank into a hard wooden chair. The enormity of it all pressed down on her. The greater good? What about the good of standing by what you believe? What about the message it would send if she capitulated, that faith could be easily discarded when authority demanded it? She thought of the Syrian refugees in Kentucky, clinging to their own symbols of faith amidst loss. Would she be telling them to hide theirs too? "Father Russo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It isn't a small thing to me. It represents survival, hope, my grandmother's journey, my own. If I take it off now, under his order, it feels like I'm saying those things don't matter, that my faith is negotiable. His Holiness has his reasons," Father Russo insisted, though he sounded less certain. "Reasons we may not understand, but the consequences of this refusal, they will be severe. For the Church's message, and frankly, Ms. Leavitt, for your career, your network. They will not be pleased." He was right. Daniel would be furious. The network executives would be apoplectic. She could be fired, blacklisted. The dream opportunity had turned into a nightmare. The pressure was immense. a physical weight on her chest. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. I need a moment, she whispered. Please. Just a few minutes alone. Father Russo hesitated, then nodded curtly. Very well. 5 minutes. But understand, Ms. Leavitt, the clock is ticking. Cameras are set up. The world is watching, even if they don't know it yet. He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Alone, Karoline slumped forward, resting her head in her hands. The quiet room offered no answers, only the echo of the Pope's command and her own refusal. What have I done? She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking. She needed an anchor. Someone outside this pressure cooker. She scrolled past Daniel's name. She couldn't face him yet. She found the number she needed. Henry Clark. Henry was her mentor, the retired pastor from her hometown church. He'd known her since she was a child, had baptized her, had sat with her family after Peter died. He was a man of deep, quiet faith, not swayed by power or politics. The phone rang twice before he answered. Karoline, isn't today the big interview? Shouldn't you be talking to the Pope right now? His voice was warm with concern. Henry, Karoline choked out, the sound strangled. Something terrible happened. She poured it all out. The garden meeting, the Pope's sudden command to remove her grandmother's cross, her refusal, his cancellation of the interview, Father Russo's pressure. She spoke in a rush, the words tumbling over each other, her voice trembling. He told me to take it off, Henry, like it meant nothing, like my faith meant nothing here. And I said no, and now it's all falling apart. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Karoline held her breath, waiting for disappointment, for Henry to tell her she'd been foolish, reckless. Karoline, Henry finally said, his voice calm and steady, like a rock in a swirling river. Listen to me. You wear that cross for Margaret. You wear it for Peter. You wear it for you, for the faith that carries you through dark times. That faith is a gift, Karoline, a personal covenant between you and God. No one, not even the Pope, gets to tell you when or how to express that covenant in your heart. His words hit her with the force of truth. The tightness in her chest eased slightly. But Henry, she whispered, the interview, my job, the scandal. Let the scandal be his, Henry said firmly. He asked you to hide your light. You chose not to. That is courage, Karoline, not scandal. Remember, Esther? For such a time as this. Maybe this moment, this stand, isn't about the interview at all. Maybe it's about something bigger, something God needs you to show the world right now. Hold firm, child. Hold firm in what you know is right. Karoline took a deep, shuddering breath. Henry's words didn't erase the fear or the potential consequences, but they gave her a foundation. The quiet room felt even smaller after Father Russo left. Karoline Leavitt stood alone, Henry Clark's words echoing in her mind. Hold firm. You stand on solid ground. The resolve was there, a small flame fighting against the cold dread in her stomach. She touched her grandmother's cross. It felt heavier now, a weight of conviction rather than just a piece of jewelry. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The silence was broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of activity from the main palace, the world preparing for an interview that might not happen. The door opened again. Father Russo stepped back in, his face grim. He didn't ask again. He simply nodded towards the corridor. Come, Ms. Leavitt. His Holiness wishes to see you before arrangements are finalized. His voice was flat, resigned. Karoline followed him, her legs feeling slightly numb. They didn't head back towards the sunny gardens, but deeper, into the cool, shadowed hallways of the Apostolic Palace. The beautiful artwork lining the walls seemed to watch her pass, silent witnesses to her potential downfall. They walked past closed doors, down a flight of stone stairs, and into a more functional, less ornate part of the building. The air felt colder here. Father Russo stopped outside a plain wooden door. He knocked softly, then opened it, gesturing, for Karoline to enter. The room inside was small and simple, dominated by a large desk. Pope Leo XIV stood by a window, his back to her, looking out at a courtyard below. He was still wearing his simple white robes. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Father Russo quietly closed the door, leaving Karoline alone with the Pope. For a long moment, neither spoke. The Pope didn't turn around. Karoline waited, her hands clenched at her sides, the silver cross cool against her skin. She focused, on breathing, on Henry's words, on her grandmother's face. Finally, Pope Leo turned. His expression was different now. The earlier inscrutability was gone, replaced by a calm seriousness, but the warmth she'd glimpsed in the garden had not returned. His eyes went immediately to her throat, to the cross. A flicker of something, disappointment, frustration, crossed his face, so quickly she might have imagined it. It was replaced by a look of weary decision. "Ms. Leavitt," he began, his voice quiet but carrying easily in the small room. "Father Russo informs me you maintain your refusal." It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Holiness," Karoline replied. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I cannot remove it. My faith and what this represents is essential to me. Taking it off would feel like a denial." She met his gaze, trying to project the strength Henry had reminded her she possessed. The Pope studied her. His gaze was intense, searching. Karoline felt like he was looking right through her, past the fear and the worry about her career, down to the core of her belief. She held her ground, refusing to look away. He sighed, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. "Faith is a complex matter, Ms. Leavitt. It requires obedience, humility before God and His Church." He paused, his eyes still locked on hers. "Your insistence on displaying this personal symbol, against the instruction given within these walls. It demonstrates a troubling independence, a placing of personal sentiment above the guidance offered here." Karoline felt a flush rise in her cheeks. "With respect, Your Holiness," she said carefully, "this cross is my connection to God's grace, as experienced through my family's survival. It's a reminder of His presence in hardship. Removing it feels like hiding that light, not practicing humility." The Pope's expression remained impassive. He walked slowly around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. "The interview was intended as a dialogue on unity, Ms. Leavitt, on shared hope. Your presence, marked by this defiance, creates discord where there should be harmony. It undermines the very purpose of your being here." His voice was firm, final. "Therefore, the interview cannot proceed as planned. It is cancelled. Immediately." The words landed like a physical blow, even though she'd expected them. The finality of it took her breath away. Cancelled, indefinitely postponed, was now definitively over. All the preparation, the hopes, the chance to speak to millions about things that mattered, gone, because of a small piece of silver. Karoline swallowed hard, fighting the sting of tears. "I understand, Your Holiness," she whispered, her voice thick. "I deeply regret the inconvenience." Inconvenience. The word felt absurdly small for the disaster unfolding. "Regret is a starting point," the Pope said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. "Reflect on this moment, Ms. Leavitt. True faith finds its expression within the fold, not in gestures that cause division." He gave her one last, long look, then turned back toward the window. The dismissal was clear. The conversation and the interview were over. Father Russo must have been waiting just outside. The door opened almost immediately. His face was a mask of professional regret. "This way, Ms. Leavitt," he said quietly. "We must get you out discreetly. The media, they are gathering." He led her through a maze of back corridors and service passages Karoline hadn't seen before. The route felt secretive, shameful. They passed a few surprised-looking staff members, a young woman carrying linens, an older man pushing a cart, who quickly averted their eyes. The message was clear. She was being escorted out the back door. The reality of her situation sank in deeper with every step. She wasn't just missing the interview, she was being removed, rejected. Finally, they emerged through a small, unmarked door into a narrow side street, away from the main Vatican gates and the bustling crowds. A simple black sedan was waiting, engine idling. A stern-faced security guard stood beside it. "Your driver will take you back to your hotel, Ms. Leavitt," Father Russo said, his voice clipped. He offered no handshake, no farewell pleasantries.
Vatican press office will issue a statement shortly citing unforeseen circumstances for the cancellation.
"We trust your network will cooperate in managing the narrative, discreetly." The implication was heavy. "Don't make this worse." Karoline just nodded, unable to speak. She slid into the back seat of the car. As the door closed, she caught a last glimpse of Father Russo's disapproving face before the car pulled away, leaving the Vatican walls behind. The drive through Rome felt surreal. The vibrant city life outside the window seemed disconnected from the turmoil inside the car. Karoline leaned her head against the cool glass, exhaustion washing over her. She had stood her ground. Henry would be proud. But at what cost? Her career was likely in ruins. Daniel would be furious. The network would probably fire her. The scandal. She hadn't even begun to process the public fallout. She felt utterly alone. Her phone, silenced during the Vatican visit, suddenly vibrated violently in her purse. Then again, and again. She pulled it out. The screen was flooded with notifications, missed calls, text messages, social media alerts. Daniel's name flashed repeatedly. There were also messages from Lisa, her friend, filled with question marks, and dozens more from numbers she didn't recognize. Before she could even process it, the phone rang. "Daniel." She took a shaky breath and answered. "Karoline." Daniel's voice was a roar, crackling with static and fury. "What in God's name happened?" The Vatican press office just sent a one-line email. "Interview canceled due to unforeseen circumstances." No explanation. Then I get a call from Frank Miller upstairs. He's heard rumors. Rumors, Karoline, from Vatican sources, that you refused a direct request from the Pope, that you were argumentative, that you got the interview canceled. Is this true? Tell me it's not true. Karoline flinched, holding the phone slightly away from her ear. "Daniel, it's complicated." "Complicated?" he yelled. "The biggest exclusive of the decade, Karoline. Global broadcast. Months of negotiation. Gone poof because of what? What did you do? The Pope. He asked me to remove my cross," Karoline said, her voice trembling. "Before the interview, he said it didn't belong there. He told me to take it off. I couldn't, Daniel. I just couldn't." There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by a string of curses. "Your grandmother's cross, that little silver thing, you threw away the interview. Your career. Over that? Are you insane, Karoline? Do you have any idea what you've done? It's not just a thing, Daniel," Karoline protested, tears finally spilling over. It's everything to me. He had no right. He's the Pope," Daniel bellowed. "He has every right. And you were there as a journalist, not a pilgrim. Your job was to get the interview, not make a personal stand. Frank is apoplectic. The board is already on a crisis call. They're talking suspension, Karoline, at best. This is catastrophic. For you, for the network. Get back to the hotel. Now, stay in your room. Do not talk to anyone. Do not post anything. Do you understand? We'll figure out damage control." He hung up abruptly. Karoline lowered the phone, her hand shaking. The confirmation of her worst fears hit her like a wave. Suspension, damage control. Her career, built over years of hard work, was crumbling because of 5 minutes in a garden. The loneliness intensified, a crushing weight. Had she been foolish? Had Henry been wrong? Was her stubbornness worth losing everything? The car pulled up to her hotel. She kept her head down, avoiding the curious glances of the doorman, and hurried through the elegant lobby towards the elevators. She just wanted to disappear into her room. As she stepped into the elevator, Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert notification. The elevator doors opened onto Karoline Leavitt's hotel floor. She stumbled out, the image from the news alert burning behind her eyes. The blurry photo captured a terrible moment. The Pope looking stern, her own hand frozen near her throat, in shock. The headline screamed clash. Her phone kept buzzing, vibrating like an angry insect in her hand. Daniel's furious call echoed in her ears. Suspension, damage control, catastrophic. She fumbled with the key card to her room, her fingers clumsy. Inside, she dropped her purse and leaned back against the closed door, sliding down to the floor. The luxurious room felt like a prison. She pulled her knees up, burying her face in her arms. The weight of it all pressed down. The canceled interview, the Pope's cold dismissal, Daniel's rage, the public scandal brewing, and the crushing loneliness. Had she thrown away everything for nothing? Henry's words about solid ground felt distant, drowned by the rising tide of consequences. Tears came then, hot and silent, soaking into the sleeve of her dress. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. She ignored it. Let Daniel yell. Let the network fire her. Right now, she just wanted the world to disappear. She touched her grandmother's cross, the familiar shape under her fingers offering little comfort. It felt like a target now. Back at the Vatican, chaos simmered beneath the surface of ancient calm. The press office scrambled. Father Paul Russo paced a small, tense office, fielding frantic calls. Reporters, tipped off by the leaked photo and the official cancellation notice, demanded answers. Unforeseen circumstances satisfied no one. Rumors swirled. Had Karoline been disrespectful? Had she insulted the Pope? Was it a theological dispute? Father Russo dodged the questions, his voice strained. He knew the truth was far stranger and potentially more explosive. The Pope had demanded a journalist remove a simple cross, and she had refused. How would that play globally? The image of the Pope seeming to scold the young woman was already spreading like wildfire online. Conservative Catholic forums buzzed with outrage at her perceived defiance. Secular media framed it as a power play by an out-of-touch institution. The narrative was spinning out of control before they could even attempt to steer it. Pope Leo XIV, however, seemed removed from the frenzy. He had returned to his private study after his brief final meeting with Karoline. He stood by the window, looking out not at the gardens but towards the city of Rome sprawling beyond the walls. His face was thoughtful, almost sad. He held his own ornate pectoral cross, the large gold symbol of his office, in his hand. His thumb traced the intricate design. He seemed deep in thought, wrestling with something unseen. An aide knocked tentatively and entered. "Your Holiness, the press secretary is deeply concerned. The photograph is everywhere. The speculation is damaging. He strongly recommends issuing a clarifying statement immediately, emphasizing Ms. Leavitt's misunderstanding of protocol." The Pope didn't turn around. "No statement," he said quietly. "But Your Holiness," the aide pressed, anxiety clear in his voice, "the story is running wild. They are painting her as a victim, or worse, you as—" "I said no statement," the Pope repeated, his voice firmer now. He finally turned. His expression was resolved, but there was a deep weariness in his eyes. "Bring her back." The aide blinked. Bring Ms. Leavitt back, Your Holiness." "But she has been dismissed. She is likely at her hotel. The interview is cancelled." "Not for the interview," the Pope said. He looked down at the heavy cross in his hand. "Bring her back here, to this room. Now. Tell Father Paul. Use discretion, but be swift." The aide stared, utterly confused, but dared not question further. He hurried out. Pope Leo XIV turned back to the window, closing his hand tightly around the gold cross. A decision had been made. Karoline was still huddled on the floor when the hotel phone rang, its sharp sound jolting her. She ignored it. It rang again, and again. Finally, she dragged herself up and picked it up. "Ms. Leavitt?" It was a man's voice, formal and slightly accented. Not Daniel. "This is the Vatican switchboard. His Holiness Pope Leo XIV requests your immediate return to the Apostolic Palace." Karoline froze. She couldn't have heard right. "What? Return? Why?" "His Holiness wishes to speak with you, Ms. Leavitt. A car is being sent for you now. It will arrive at the service entrance in 10 minutes. Please be ready." The line went dead. Karoline stared at the receiver. This made no sense. He had coldly dismissed her, canceled everything. Why summon her back? Was it to force her to apologize publicly? To humiliate her further? To demand she remove the cross after all, under threat of something worse? Fear, cold and sharp, mixed, with a flicker of bewildered anger. She thought about refusing, just hiding in the room, but defiance felt hollow now, replaced by a desperate, painful curiosity. What could he possibly want? 10 minutes later, feeling numb and exposed, she was slipping out the hotel's service entrance. The same black Vatican sedan was there. The same stern-faced driver held the door open. She slid in silently. The drive back felt even shorter, a blur of ancient stone and bustling streets. They didn't use the grand gates or the back alley this time, but entered through a discreet guarded archway usually reserved for official vehicles. Karoline was ushered quickly inside, met by the same anxious aide who had delivered the summons. He led her through familiar yet now intimidating corridors, back towards the Pope's private study. The atmosphere was electric with unspoken tension. Staff members they passed quickly looked away, but their sideways glances were filled with intense curiosity. Father Paul Russo was waiting outside the study door. He looked pale, his usual composure frayed. He opened his mouth as if to say something, perhaps a warning or an instruction, but then closed it again. He simply nodded towards the door, his expression unreadable. Karoline took a deep, shaky breath and pushed the door open. Pope Leo XIV stood in the center of the simple room. He wasn't by the window now. He faced the door, waiting. His posture was straight, his expression grave but no longer cold. He held his large gold pectoral cross in both hands before him. The room was silent except for the faint sound of Karoline's own rapid heartbeat. "Ms. Leavitt," the Pope said, his voice calm but carrying a profound weight, "thank you for returning." Karoline stood just inside the door, frozen. She couldn't find her voice. What was happening? Why was he holding his cross like that? The Pope took a step towards her. His eyes, she noticed, held a deep sorrow. And something else, respect? "You spoke of your faith," he began, his gaze steady on hers. "You spoke of what this," he gestured slightly towards her throat, where her silver cross lay hidden beneath her dress, "represents to you. Survival. Hope. A connection to God's grace in hardship." He paused, his own voice thickening. Slightly. "You defended it. Against instruction. Against pressure. Against me." He took another step closer. Karoline instinctively took a small step back, her back touching the closed door. The room felt incredibly small. "That defense," the Pope continued, his voice gaining strength. "That refusal to hide your light. It is rare, and it is precious." He looked down at the heavy gold cross in his hands, then back up at her. "This cross," he lifted it slightly, "is a symbol of office, of tradition, of the Church's authority, but true faith, the faith that endures persecution, that holds fast in darkness, that faith belongs not to popes or palaces." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Karoline flinched, bracing herself for, she didn't know what. But Pope Leo, he didn't reach for her silver cross. Instead, with deliberate, almost reverent movements, he lifted the heavy gold chain of his own pectoral cross. Karoline's eyes widened in utter disbelief as he carefully placed the large, ornate symbol of the papacy over her head. The weight of it settled against her chest, cool and immense, resting right beside the small, hidden silver shape of her grandmother's cross. The world stopped. Karoline stopped breathing. She stared down at the gleaming gold cross, then up, at the Pope's face. His expression was fierce with conviction, his eyes bright. "This cross," Pope Leo XIV declared, his voice ringing clear and strong in the silent room, "belongs to those who defend their faith without fear. Wear it, Ms. Leavitt. Wear it as a reminder of the courage you showed today. Wear it for all those who must hold fast to their light in the shadows." He stepped back. The gesture was complete. Karoline stood paralyzed, the impossible weight of the Pope's own cross resting against her skin. The small silver cross beneath her dress felt suddenly warm. Father Paul Russo, who must have been watching through a slightly ajar door, pushed it open fully, his face a mask of utter shock and dawning horror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Pope Leo XIV simply looked at Karoline, a profound stillness settling over him. "Go now," he said softly. "The world is waiting." In the hallway, a Vatican photographer, alerted by the aide moments before in a frantic gamble, lowered his camera. He had captured the entire astonishing scene, the Pope placing his cross around Karoline Leavitt's neck. He stared at the image preview on his screen, his hands trembling. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this single photograph was about to detonate across the globe. The real story hadn't been the clash, it was this moment of stunning, unimaginable reversal. The world wasn't just waiting anymore, it was about to be stunned. Karoline Leavitt stood frozen in the Pope's simple study. The heavy gold cross, the Pope's own pectoral cross, lay against her chest. It felt impossibly cold, impossibly heavy, like a piece of the ancient building itself had been hung around her neck. Her mind was blank. She could only stare down at the gleaming symbol, her fingers trembling inches away, afraid to touch it. Pope Leo XIV's words echoed in the ringing silence. "This cross belongs to those who defend their faith without fear." The Pope stepped back, his face calm but his eyes intense. He looked at her, then at the open door where Father Paul Russo stood, utterly paralyzed. The secretary's mouth hung open, his face a mask of pure shock and dawning terror. He looked from the Pope to Karoline, to the immense gold cross resting on her navy dress, then back to the Pope. No sound escaped him. It was as if the world had stopped turning. In the hallway, just beyond Father Russo, stood the Vatican photographer, Ronald. He slowly lowered his camera, his eyes wide as saucers, fixed on the small screen on the back of his device. He had captured it. The impossible moment. Pope Leo XIV, the leader of over 1 billion Catholics worldwide, placing the most sacred symbol of his office around the neck of an American journalist he had just publicly dismissed. Ronald's hands shook. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this single image was dynamite. It would change everything. "Go now," the Pope repeated softly to Karoline, his voice cutting through her stunned silence. "The world is waiting." The words jolted her. Go? How could she go? How could she walk out of here wearing this? She felt like she was carrying a priceless, burning artifact. Her legs felt like lead. She looked desperately at Father Russo, but he seemed incapable of movement or speech, still reeling. Ronald, the photographer, finally broke the spell. He turned on his heel and sprinted down the hallway, clutching his camera like a lifeline. He had to get this image out. Now. His sudden movement seemed to unfreeze Father Russo. The secretary finally found his voice, a strangled whisper directed at the Pope. "Your Holiness, what have you done?" The question was filled with disbelief and a kind of horrified awe. The Pope didn't answer him. He simply gave Karoline a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a dismissal, but also an instruction. Go. Karoline took a shaky step backwards, then another. Her hand finally rose, her fingers brushing the cold, intricate surface of the Pope's cross. The solid weight of it was terrifyingly real. She turned, stumbling slightly, and walked past the stunned Father Russo into the hallway. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. Aides and priests froze as she passed, their eyes instantly drawn to the impossible sight glowing against her dress. Whispers erupted behind her like startled birds taking flight. No one stopped her. No one guided her this time. She walked blindly, following the path she vaguely remembered from her earlier, shameful exit. Every step felt heavy, conspicuous. The cross seemed to pulse against her skin, a beacon announcing her presence. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, afraid to meet anyone's gaze. She pushed through a heavy door and found herself back in the narrow side street where the car had dropped her off earlier. The same black sedan was there, the same driver holding the door open. His eyes, usually stern and impassive, widened, slightly as they fell on the gold cross. He quickly looked away, saying nothing. Karoline practically fell into the back seat. The door closed, sealing her in. As the car pulled away, she finally dared to look down again. The Pope's cross lay there, huge and ornate beside the simple hidden lump of her grandmother's silver cross beneath her dress collar. The contrast was staggering, power and tradition beside personal history and quiet faith. She gently lifted the heavy gold chain, feeling its weight. What did it mean? Was it a blessing? A burden? A political statement? Her mind couldn't grasp it, and inside the Vatican, the explosion Ronald the photographer had predicted began. He burst into the crowded, chaotic press office. Reporters were shouting questions about the canceled interview and the leaked garden photo. Ronald ignored them all. He shoved his camera towards a young, harried communications assistant, Gabriella. "Get this to the wire services, now, all of them, highest priority, direct order from His Holiness." His voice was raw with urgency. Gabriella, confused, looked at the image on the screen. Her eyes went huge. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Madonna," she breathed. She understood instantly. She plugged the camera into a computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Within seconds, the astonishing image, Pope Leo XIV, placing his cross around Karoline Leavitt's neck, was hurtling through digital pipelines to Associated Press, Reuters, Agence France Presse, and every major news outlet globally. The attached caption was simple, dictated by Ronald in a shaking voice. Pope Leo XIV bestows his pectoral cross upon journalist Karoline Leavitt following their earlier meeting. Vatican City. Today. Simultaneously, the image appeared on the official Vatican News social media accounts. There was no explanation, just the picture. The effect was instantaneous and volcanic. In the press office, the roar of questions died abruptly as editors and reporters stared at their screens, tablets, and phones. Jaws dropped. Someone gasped. Then the noise erupted again. 10 times louder, a cacophony of disbelief and frantic activity. Phones rang off the hook. The garden confrontation photo was instantly forgotten. This was the story. The only story. Karoline's phone, silenced during the drive, began to vibrate violently the moment she stepped into her hotel lobby. It wasn't just buzzing, it was shuddering continuously in her purse. She ignored it, keeping her head down, clutching the strap of her bag tightly over the visible gold cross, trying to hide it as she hurried towards the elevators. The lobby seemed louder than before, buzzing with an unfamiliar energy. People were clustered, staring at phones, talking, excitedly. She caught fragments. Unbelievable. The Pope's cross? Who is she? Her heart hammered against the heavy symbol. She jabbed the elevator button, desperate for the sanctuary of her room. The doors slid open. She rushed in and pressed the button for her floor, leaning against the mirrored wall as the doors closed. Only then did she pull out her phone. The screen was a solid wall of notifications, missed calls, texts, emails, social media alerts, hundreds, thousands. Daniel's name flashed repeatedly, along with numbers she didn't recognize and names of major news networks. Before she could process it, a news alert banner scrolled across the top of the screen. Breaking. Pope Leo XIV gifts his pectoral cross to journalist Karoline Leavitt after interview cancellation. Photo released by Vatican. Below the text was the photograph. Clear, undeniable. Pope Leo, face filled with fierce conviction, placing the immense gold cross around her neck. She looked pale, stunned, her eyes wide with shock. The elevator doors opened on her floor. Karoline stumbled out, her legs weak. She fumbled with her keycard, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice. Finally, she got the door open and slammed it shut behind her, locking it. Alone, she sank to the floor again, back against the door, just like before. But this time it wasn't despair. It was overwhelming, paralyzing shock. She stared at the photo on her phone. It was real. It had happened. And now, the entire world knew. Her phone rang. Daniel. She answered numbly, holding the phone to her ear but unable to speak. Karoline! Daniel's voice wasn't angry anymore. It was high-pitched, almost hysterical. The photo. Is it real? Did he really? Oh my God, Karoline, talk to me. What happened? It's real, Karoline whispered, her voice hoarse. She touched the cold gold cross. He put it on me. He said, it belongs to those who defend their faith. Daniel made a strangled sound. Do you have any idea? This is massive, Karoline. Bigger than the interview. Bigger than anything, the network. Frank Miller is having a heart attack. In a good way, we're being swamped. Everyone wants you. Interviews, talk shows, book deals. Karoline, you're the biggest story on the planet. His words tumbled over each other, filled with frantic excitement. The narrative had flipped completely, from scandal to sensation, from career suicide to global fame. Karoline barely heard him. She was still staring at the photo on her own screen. Her gaze shifted to the live social media feed below the news alert. The hashtag #TakeOffTheCross was already trending worldwide, but the meaning had transformed. People weren't using it to condemn her anymore. They were using it in awe, in solidarity, in confusion. Take off the cross, more like put it on her. Unbelievable. What does this mean? Is the Pope endorsing defiance? Karoline Leavitt just became the bravest woman alive, standing up to power and getting blessed for it. More take off the cross. My grandmother cried when she saw the photo. She said it gave her hope. Take off the cross. The Vatican is imploding. Traditionalists must be furious. Take off the cross. The phone slipped from Karoline's fingers, clattering to the floor. Daniel's voice became a tinny, distant squawk. She leaned her head back against the door, closing her eyes. The weight of the Pope's cross pressed against her, cold and solid. Beneath her dress, her grandmother's small silver cross felt warm. The noise of the world, Daniel's yelling, the buzzing phone, the roar of the internet, was a storm outside the door. Inside, Karoline was utterly still, lost in the silent, staggering reality of what had just happened, and the terrifying. The hotel room door felt like the only solid thing in a spinning world. Karoline Leavitt sat on the floor, her back pressed against it. The cold, heavy weight of the Pope's gold cross pressed against her chest. Beneath it, the small silver cross from her grandmother felt warm, almost alive. Her phone lay buzzing and blinking on the carpet nearby, a frantic insect ignored. Daniel's excited voice had faded to a tinny echo after she dropped the phone. She couldn't pick it up. She couldn't move. Outside this door, chaos was exploding. She knew it. The photograph, the impossible image of Pope Leo XIV, placing his sacred cross around her neck, was everywhere. The world wasn't just watching anymore. It was shouting, debating, celebrating, condemning. The hashtag #TakeOffTheCross, born from the leaked garden photo meant to shame her, was now a global rallying cry. But for what? She didn't even know. A wave of exhaustion, deeper than any she'd ever known, washed over her. The emotional whiplash was too much. From the high of the invitation to the shock of the Pope's demand, the terror of refusal, the crushing despair of cancellation, and now this staggering, unbelievable gesture that turned everything upside down. Why had he done it? The question pounded in her head with every beat of her heart against the heavy gold. Inside the Vatican, the chaos was even more intense, but of a different kind. Father Paul Russo finally found his voice, rushing back into the Pope's study after Karoline left. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "Your Holiness," he gasped, his voice tight with panic. "The photograph, wait, it's already released. Every news outlet, social media, and it's everywhere. Cardinal Bellini, he's demanding an immediate audience. The phones are ringing off the hook. What are we to say?" Pope Leo XIV stood by the window again, his back to the room. He seemed calmer now, almost serene despite the storm he'd unleashed. "Say nothing, Father Paul," he replied, his voice quiet but firm. "The image speaks for itself." "But Your Holiness," Father Russo persisted, his voice rising. "Cardinal Bellini is furious. He calls it sacrilege, an insult to the office. He's mobilizing others. They demand an explanation." The Pope turned slowly. His expression was serious, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before the garden confrontation. "Let Cardinal Bellini demand. Let others question. The act stands. It needed to be done." He paused, looking past his secretary, his gaze distant. "Sometimes, Father, tradition needs shaking to remind us of the foundation it's built upon. Faith, courage, not rules carved in stone." Father Russo stared, bewildered. He had served this pope for 2 years, admired his compassion, but this was radical, dangerous. "And Ms. Leavitt, what becomes of her? She wears the symbol of your office, the world sees it. She wears a reminder," the Pope said simply. "For herself, for others. Now please, manage the practicalities. I will speak with Cardinal Bellini when he arrives." He turned, back to the window, effectively ending the conversation. Father Russo stood for a moment, stunned, then bowed stiffly and hurried out, bracing himself for the firestorm. Cardinal Angelo Bellini's fury was volcanic. In a richly appointed room elsewhere in the Apostolic Palace, he paced like a caged lion. Several other high-ranking, traditionally minded cardinals sat grim-faced around a polished table. News feeds played silently on a large screen, all showing the same image: Karoline Leavitt wearing the Pope's cross. "This is insanity," Bellini thundered, slamming a fist onto the table. "He places the pectoral cross, the very symbol of Peter's authority, on a journalist, a woman who openly defied him hours before. What message does this send? That defiance is rewarded? That the sacred symbols of our office are trinkets to be handed out? It undermines centuries of tradition, Angelo," another cardinal, a man named Ricci, said gravely. "It looks like weakness, like capitulation." "It looks like he's lost his mind," Bellini snapped. "This American woman, she knows nothing of true faith. She wears her little cross-like fashion. And now he validates her disobedience? He makes her a saint for it?" His voice dripped with contempt. "We cannot allow this. We must confront him, demand he publicly clarify, retract something, and demand the return of the cross immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. The photograph wasn't just an image. It was a challenge to their understanding of authority and order within the church. The garden confrontation had been a scandal. This felt like a revolution. Caroline's phone eventually stopped buzzing. The battery died. The sudden silence was jarring, but a relief. She finally pushed herself up off the floor. Her legs felt stiff. She walked to the window, pulling the curtains aside slightly. Below, the street was unusually crowded. People milled about, some looking up at the hotel. Camera crews were setting up near the entrance. The world was waiting, right outside. She turned away, her hand instinctively going to the heavy gold cross. It felt alien, yet somehow anchoring. She needed to understand. Why? Why had the Pope, after dismissing her so coldly, done this? Sitting at the small desk, she opened her laptop. Ignoring the flood of emails and news alerts, she started searching. Not about the current chaos, but about Pope Leo XIII himself. She dug deeper than her pre-interview research, looking for clues in his past before he became Pope. She read about his childhood in a poor neighborhood in Argentina. She read about his early work as a priest in violent slums. She found an old interview he gave years ago, long before his papacy. He spoke vaguely about law-shaping faith, about the courage of the unseen believer. It felt personal, but he gave no details. Then, buried in an obscure Catholic news archive from decades past, she found it. A small article about a tragedy in Argentina during a period of military dictatorship. It mentioned a young priest, Jorge Bergoglio, the Pope's birth name, and his family. And it mentioned his younger sister, Maria Bergoglio. Karoline's fingers flew over the keyboard. More searches yielded little, mostly just her name linked to her famous brother. But then, on a historical forum dedicated to documenting victims of the dictatorship, she found a faded photograph and a brief, heartbreaking entry. The photo showed a young woman, maybe 18, with kind eyes and a shy smile. Maria Bergoglio. The entry was sparse. Maria Bergoglio. Disappeared. March 15, 1977. Last seen near her home. Family searched tirelessly. Father Jorge Bergoglio, now Pope Leo XIV, was deeply involved in efforts to find her. Believed targeted due to family's suspected opposition sympathies. Fate unknown. Presumed dead. Karoline stared at the grainy photo. Maria's eyes seemed to look back at her. The date of disappearance. The Pope would have been a young priest then. The article mentioned he never stopped searching, never stopped believing she might be found. But she never was. Then, a single, chilling sentence in a witness testimony, unearthed years later, caught Karoline's eye. A former prisoner described seeing a young woman matching Maria's description in a secret detention center. The witness recalled, "They took everything. Her name, her dignity. They ripped the small cross from her neck on the first day. She cried for it silently. It was all she had left of home." Karoline's breath hitched. She touched her own silver cross, then the heavy gold one. The pieces crashed together with devastating clarity. The Pope's sister, taken. Her small cross, a symbol of home and faith, ripped away by those who sought to crush her spirit. Maria died without it, her faith stripped bare by cruelty. His demand in the garden, "Take off the cross, it does not belong here." It hadn't been about rules or power. It had been a test, a brutal, shocking test born from his deepest pain. He had forced Karoline into the position his sister had been in, ordered to deny her faith symbol. And Karoline, like Maria in that dark cell, had refused. But unlike Maria, Karoline had the freedom to say no. And she had. He hadn't punished her defiance. He had recognized it, honored it, with the most powerful symbol he possessed. He hadn't given her his cross despite her refusal. He had given it to her because of it. Because she embodied the defiant, unbreakable faith his sister had shown, even in the face of annihilation. He was saying Maria's faith mattered, that Karoline's faith mattered, that faith worn courageously, especially when challenged, was the truest form. Tears streamed down Karoline's face, hot and silent. The weight of the gold cross changed. It was no longer just a burden or a symbol of office, it was a memorial, a tribute, an immense heartbreaking act of love from a brother who had lost his sister, channeled through a stranger who had shown the same quiet courage. Downstairs, the hotel lobby was packed. News crews jostled for position. Daniel Brooks pushed his way through, his face flushed with frantic energy. He'd flown overnight to Rome. He had to see Karoline. He had to manage this phenomenon. In a quiet corner, a woman watched the chaos. Elena Rossi was a mid-level aide in the Vatican Communications Office, loyal to the Pope but frightened by the backlash. She had seen Cardinal Bellini's rage. She knew the whispers of a potential censure. She also knew the truth about Maria Bergoglio. It was a quiet sorrow within certain Vatican circles. Seeing the Pope's gesture, she understood its depth, but she feared the traditionalists would tear him apart. She pulled out her phone, not to call a reporter, but to send a secure, encrypted message to a trusted contact in the International Religious Freedom Network. The message was simple.